Today we're going to show you how to make beer.
Hi, I'm Brian.
I'm Derica, and you're watching City Steading Brews.
And today we're making a porter, which is really just an improved version of my brown ale, maybe a little bit more alcohol, quite a bit darker, and little teaser, it shockingly tastes like Guinness. So to make beer, really simple. This is a raw ale method. So if you've never seen that, that's another thing you want to watch for. This is the way I make beer all the time now, and it's awesome. What I have right now is a big graniteware 3-gallon container filled with 1.5 gallons of water. The reason there's 1.5 gallons in there, it's a little more, it's like 1 3/4, is I'm making a 1.5 gallon batch. Why 1.5 gallon batch? Because I felt like it. Because it's a 2-gallon bucket. I didn't want to fill it all the way because bubbles and foam and it gets all over the place and makes a mess. So 1.5 gallons. A little more than a gallon, a little less than 2, right? It works for me. We have over here a heat controller, heat and cool controller actually, but I'm only using it on heat. I'm gonna have a link to this in the description. This is a really cool item. It's like 30 bucks. And what it does is, here's the story. I tried using my sous vide immersion circulator to make beer. I killed it in 2 brews. It's done.
It worked beautifully.
Oh, it did. It really did. It worked awesome.
But the sugars and the grains
They just got in there.
in the filtration part, the one that circulates the water. And
yeah, it killed it. So it doesn't work anymore. So what I did is I got this heat controller, and it has a probe here that it's a thermometer probe, and I drop that into the water. And then in the heating element side, I have a heating element, which I can show you real quick. You can hear it sizzling. That sucker's hot. It's heating the water, okay? What I'm heating the water to, this is going to be a little bit surprising. I'm heating the water to 175 degrees.
Now, some of you who homebrew yourselves are probably going, what?
Well, I'm going to do a boil and bag method. So we're going to put a bag in there. We're going to dump all of our grains in. That's going to drop the temperature by about 10 degrees or so, give or take. And this is a boil high brew, okay, or a mash high. Sorry, this is a mash high brew. So it'll be 165 mash in temperature. And you might be wondering, why so high? Anywhere from 145 to 165 is considered a normal range. The lower you go, the more alcohol you're going to get out of those grains, the less body and mouthfeel. Okay? The higher you go, the less alcohol you get from the grains because the sugars are a little bit less fermentable, but you get a better mouthfeel and you get the deeper, richer, that's what I want. So I mashed this at 165. By the way, this is the second time I'm making this recipe, and I did that on purpose. I made the recipe up after experimentation and got this recipe working so beautifully. There's only one little addition that I changed, and that's a recent thing. I'll explain in a little bit.
So in case you're confused by what Brian just said about getting more alcohol out of the grains, we're not actually getting alcohol out of the grains because that's not how this works. We're getting sugars that get created into alcohol.
You get more fermentable sugars at a lower mash temp, and you get less fermentable sugars at a higher mash temp.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, she's right. Sorry, I got my mix all talked up. I do that from time to time. Anyway, I'm trying to keep a bunch of numbers in my head so I don't forget. Okay.
So we have everything that we need.
Yes. Now I'm going to go through all the stuff that we need for this beer. First, you're going to need now this is for the 1.5 gallon recipe, by the way. You need 1 pound of 2-row pale malt barley. Just standard stuff, nothing fancy. You're going to need, I have notes, I'm just going to look at them. You need 1/2 pound of crystal malt, which is actually right here. And if you look at that, see how dark that is compared to the 2-row? That's the cool thing.
And
it smells awesome.
It gives a really nice caramel-like flavor.
Yeah, it's like a roasty caramel flavor. And then we have 1/2 pound of white wheat as well. That's in there mostly for like mouthfeel and a little bit of flavor, make it almost creamy. Like those of you that like Hefeweizen and all those kind of beers are really going to appreciate that, which, speaking of that, I'm going to be doing a kit of a Dunkelweizen soon. Not today, but anyway. So now I got you all excited about that. Let's go back to this one. Then also 4 ounces, which is 1/4 pound of roasted barley. Now that again is really for color and a little added flavor, okay? And that's it. What we are also going to do is add 0.3 ounces of Cascade hops. Now I know those of you that do beer regularly are going, if you're doing a no boil or a raw ale method, how do you get the hops to bitter? Good question. I have a pot over here with some water in it. I'm going to take my 0.3 ounces of Cascade pellet hops, and if someone asks me why I'm using Cascade hops, I bought a big bag of it. So that's what I use until they're gone. Then I will try other hops. For right now, I'm going to use Cascade. It's what I used the first time that worked wonderfully. I'm going to put this in some water, put this on the stove, let it come to a nice low boil, about 30 minutes. It doesn't matter if it steeps longer. Turn off the heat, take it off the heat, let it just sit if you need to. It's fine, okay? By the way, you can see some steam coming off the water now. It's at 119.6 degrees. I'll be right back. Okay, so now that we've gone through some of that, the first thing that I really like to do when I'm starting up a new brew is I want to hydrate my yeast. So while our water is still going, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be using Safale SO4. Why am I using this one? I bought a 20 pack of it and I still have some. So that's part of it. And this is a wonderful ale yeast. It's a really great ale and beer yeast. So it's very useful. So I'm going to use my handy dandy Swiss Army knife and cut this open. Now, how much yeast am I going to use? Those of you who are longtime viewers of the show probably already know the answer to that. And no, it's not a fifth of a packet. It's actually about half, because I've recently changed my idea on that. So what I'm going to do is just dump roughly half this packet in here, and the other half, I'm going to fold that up, hand it to my lovely, I hate to call her an assistant because she's my partner in crime here. That gets taped and put in the fridge because that way it lasts longer. Okay, and I put that into some water. It was a little warm, like maybe 105, 110 degrees. I'm just going to give that a little stir. All we're doing is hydrating it, just getting some water in it, activating them, waking them up, however you want to see it.
The temperature of the water isn't that crucial unless it's too hot.
Right, you don't want to go over 115. You really don't want to go below like 70 either, because too cold stunts the yeast. You want to make them happy. You want to wake them up, get them all comfy and warm, and get them going, you know? So some of you might be wondering, why am I using such an odd way to heat up my water? Well, I tested this the other day, and I actually did it with the boiling bag in there. I found that with the element, it was a little scary because I didn't want that element to touch the bag. I also couldn't get the heat into the grains as well, so I'm not really going to be super anal about it today, but what I am going to do is leave the temperature probe in there so I know what's happening. I feel that for a 1 hour mash, this is going to be just fine. All we're going to do is pop a lid on there and it'll stay. Even if it drops down to like 155 by the end, that's still well within mash temp range, right? Now, I want to talk about something that's going to be going into this beer that I don't normally use. And there's a reason why I don't use it, and there's a reason why I'm going to use it. And that is lactose. We have a 1/4 pound of lactose. You probably noticed this funny white powder in the corner. I am adding that because when I made this beer the first time, as wonderful as it was, it lacked a little bit of sweetness. It just, at the end, needed just a little bit more. Now, if I had put sugar in, or more grains, I would have made more fermentable sugars and just made a higher alcohol. Not really what I'm after. I wanted that residual mouthfeel and sugar and sweetness, and that's how you get that, is by lactose. Those of you that know our channel know we're very into doing this as natural as possible, but we're also practical and, you know, somewhat reasonable. We do live in a city, so things that we can get in a city that are easily attained without being truly chemical additives, we're going to try to use them. When I looked into how lactose is collected and gotten into this form versus how white sugar is collected and gotten into that form, I saw a lot of parallels, and I didn't really see a lot of differences, and I didn't really see a lot of things with this that would make me not want to use it if I'm already comfortable with using white sugar. So that's how I came to it. Plus, it's a really nice way to not have to pasteurize everything. I did some testing. I took some of this and dissolved it in water and tasted it. You know what it tasted like? Sugar water. I didn't taste milk. I didn't taste anything that would make me think of milk. It's sugar. It was wonderful. It was a great day for me. So I decided this beer needed a little more sweetness. That's why that's going in there. I'm going to put it in during the mash-in, though it doesn't actually matter where you put it in the timeline. So a little bit about the raw ale method. If you talk to some people in Europe, they will say, why do you boil your beer? Now, back in the day, beer was boiled for a couple of reasons. Some of them made sense, some of them not so much. The one that makes sense is they might have not used the best water or the best grains, but in a lot of cases they really did because they wanted to make a good beer. Now, the home brewer may not have had access to great stuff. They might have used grains that were on their way out. They might have used water that, they washed last night's dishes in or something. I don't know. I'm making this up. I don't really know. So they boiled it to get rid of anything that might be a contaminant, okay? And that makes sense. Today, we're cleaner. We don't really have to worry about such things. And the mash-in process is pretty much pasteurization anyway. So not really a problem. The other reason that they boiled beer, though, is kind of funny. Like when you're boiling stuff and the bubbles that come up, they thought that that's how you made beer, carbonated. So we kind of know that that's not true, and actually it's the opposite because all the oxygen is leaving the water, so not really a good way to carbonate a beer. But that's what they did it for, and that's what they thought. The raw ale method is actually basically very, very simple. You mash your beer, which is just using the alpha and beta amylase enzymes already in the grains. You activate them by heating them to a certain temperature, and they start converting starch into sugar, which is what the yeast consume to make beer. You do that. Once that's done, you put it in a fermenter. That's it. Add your yeast. You're done. It's a very simple thing. This has taken beer making from an all-day process to me to a couple hours. It just makes it so much easier. Why do I use the big bucket versus doing it on the stove? I do it both ways. It really depends. This particular graniteware can't go on our stove because it has a concave thing. We have a glass top stove, so it can actually crack your stove. It was intended to be used with something else that didn't work out. So I came up with another system that might be working out, and that's what we're using today. Our water is just about there. In fact, it's close enough that I'm going to unplug it and we'll start moving forward. All right, so the element comes out. Now this thing's hot.
It's really hot.
It's really hot. Hear that steam? So I'm just gonna set it over here on a pan to let that cool. All right. Now, leaving the temperature gauge in there, we have our boiling bag right here, which it's just a nylon bag. We actually got them on Amazon. I'll have links to them if you want. It is just a bag made for doing this, okay? And we're just gonna set it over the side just like that.
We did have it in...
Oh yeah, it's been sanitized.
We did have it in the sanitizer.
In what? What did we put it in?
The red bucket of sanitization! And then we let it, or I wringed it out real well, and then I let it sit in our fermentation bucket to let it dry out a little bit.
Right. Now all we're going to do is I'm going to take all of our grains and start putting them in. This is the 1 pound of 2-row. I'm just dropping it right in. I'm going to hand that to Derica. We got our 1/2 pound of white wheat. They're all malts, okay? And they've all been cracked, which is to say they're not a powder, but they're kind of broken. Best way to say it. Then we have crystal malt, 1/2 pound, if you're keeping track. And then we have a 1/4 pound of roasted barley. And at this point, I'm also going to add the lactose. You can add the lactose just before bottling. You can add it after the mash, during the mash. Almost makes no difference whatsoever. And it's not going to change anything for carbonation, just in case somebody thinks, because it's a non-fermentable sugar. That's why this works. It keeps a sugar level, a sweetness level that doesn't ferment out. So you get a sweet product in the end without having to pasteurize. Win-win, right?
So you can see with Brian's line of thinking that there may be more uses for lactose in our brewing future.
Yes. Okay, so once you have your grains in, you want to give this a good stir because nobody likes dough balls. It's just a bad thing. You don't want clumps of dried up grains that never get extracted because, you paid for these grains. You're spending all the time doing all the work. You want to make sure you get the most out of them. So I'm just giving this a stir. Now, time is important here because see all this steam coming off? That's heat too. So pop the lid on there. What we want to do is let this stay as warm as possible. Right now it's 166 degrees, okay? I'm going to let this go for 1 hour. At that time, it's going to drop temperature. It's going to drop to probably 150.
I'm going to go grab a towel or a blanket so we can try to keep some of that heat in.
All right, so we just put some towels around this to try to keep it warmer. They make all kinds of crazy contraptions to do this. We're just going to wrap it up. It's already dropping a little bit, and it's okay. We'll be back in about an hour. See you then. Okay, so it's been a little over an hour. We had some weird things happen. Like the temperature started dropping really, really fast all of a sudden. So we wrapped it in some more towels, and it was still dropping. But as we moved it, then the temperature jumped like 10 degrees according to the thermometer. So I have actually tested this thing before. I believe it's accurate. I just believe where you place that probe is very critical. So because it dropped so much, I took everything off, pulled the bag to the side, dropped the heating element back in. Then it made it a little too warm, so I unplugged it and left it off. And right now, it was dropped down to 161 degrees. We just moved it around a little bit, and it's at 168 again. So, yeah, I think it's okay though. So that just goes to show you how finicky thermometers and temperature can really be. Is the middle of that grain bag 168 degrees? I don't think so. I'm coming up with other ways to make beer too. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything. Just trying to come up with a nice, simple, reliable method. And I'm pretty sure I'm just going to have to get one of those big igloo coolers at some point. I don't really want to have to do it that way because I can't put my heating element in there. So I still have to heat the water separately, put it in there to... It just turns into a mess. And this is why I don't make a lot of beer, even though I'm starting to really like beer. Okay, so I'm going to take the lid off and hand this to my lovely assistant who's going to put it over on the side or somewhere. And I'm going to take the heating element out, which is, you know, it's been off for a while. It's just hot. I'm going to set that over here. You want to make sure you wash that real good because stuff gets stuck to it and it's just not good. Then temperature probe comes out. Now, what we have here is our wort, okay? We also have this big bag in here. Now, one of the reasons I like this particular container is because I can pick this up, let those grains drain. Say that 3 times fast. And it came with this nifty little basket that we can just set it in there and they drain in. Now, because I'm only making a 1.5 gallon batch, it doesn't touch the bottom. It lets everything drain out. They say you don't really want to squeeze this bag too much. Now, I like to push a little bit on it. It's hot though. The reason I do that is because all the water will not come out. I am not sparging. Now, some people might have a problem with that. Let me explain why. When you do a boil and bag method, you generally really don't sparge. I started with the amount of water that I needed, and you're going to say, oh, but there's all these sugars. Well, I kind of tested that theory. The last beer I made just the other day, I didn't sparge at all. I barely even did this, and I hit my target gravity. So I don't know if that means that sparging doesn't really work, or if I just did something very right, or if I got very lucky, but it was the same.
Now we have to remember, because we've already added the lactose into this, that's going to affect our gravity reading.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But we have to remember the amount of lactose we put in and how much that will affect the gravity reading to know what the gravity is for what is fermentable versus what is the actual gravity reading.
Actually, it'll be about 10 points.
If that makes any sense.
Now, people have asked along the way, what do I do with spent grains? Well, we did a granola bars video on them, and they were really good. You can bake them into bread. You can feed them to your chickens. You can put them in your compost. You can actually just throw them right in your garden, can't you? Yeah, they're like mulch. There's a lot of things you can do with it. We tend to use them in various ways. Depends. Like this particular one would probably be good in bread or in granola bars. When we use cacao nibs in here, not as good in the granola bars.
We find that the cacao nibs are a little too crunchy.
Yeah.
So those normally go to the chickens. We thought it would be a good idea because we'd be like, oh, it'd be like chocolatey. No, it's like eating like a
tree bark,
coconut bark or something. It's thick, hard. Yeah, no.
Okay, so what I'm trying to do is just get a little bit more of the liquid out of here, or a lot more, whatever you want to say. And I'm twisting it up, pressing a little bit. I'm not going too hard at it. I can hear some liquid coming out still. I want to get most of it out. You know, we don't want to waste anything because this is where your sugars are. This is your fermentables right here coming out. Yes, I do. I think we're just going to drop it right into this pot here. That was probably not a good thing to do.
It's not going to fit in this.
Yeah, it is. It'll fit. We can do it. Mostly. It's hot. See, look at that. She didn't think it would fit. Alrighty. So now we're done with this guy. And now what's left is the wort, okay? And I want to get that into this. So this is where we get a little bit dangerous here. And I'm just going to dump this in. Don't get burned. Ta-da! I'm gonna get rid of this. So now we have our wort. Unfortunately, it's very hot right now. So what I am going to do though is remember we talked about the hops tea that we had to make. We didn't call it hops tea, but that's what it actually is. That was boiled for about 30 minutes or so, and it's just been sitting. It's actually cooled. I'm going to dump it right in here with that and give it a little rinse out so it's all in there. And that's how you still bitter your beer, by using hops, by making a tea. While we were waiting for this to steep, I actually looked up a whole bunch of different methods, and there is a guy in Estonia that did exactly what I just did, and he makes what's called farmhouse beer. It's actually the same idea. I'm going to use this temperature probe again, and I just want to get a temperature on this. You do not want to pitch yeast until your wort is at most 115 degrees. Right now we are at over 140. This is where people will use a wort chiller, which is just a bunch of copper tubing and they run water through it and it cools things down really fast. I don't have one of those. Someday maybe I'll make one, but I'm not all that worried about it. What I'm probably going to do with this is I'm going to go fill my bathtub with about that much water, set this in it, cool it off in about 10 minutes. And we're back. Okay, so this went into my bathtub, as I said, and you can judge all you want, but I bet you have a bathtub, but do you have a copper coil cooler thing? Maybe not. So that's how I do it. For small batches like this, it really doesn't matter. It took, what, 10 minutes? 15 minutes tops? It's not that long. It is cooled down to about, it was, well, let's just find out, shall we? 109. 109. I'm good with that. Basically, you don't want it to be over 150. I mean, some people will say 120, but try to keep it below that. So what we're going to do right now is notice the yeast. See that nice foam? That means it's alive still. And they're just probably waiting to be dumped into something like this. So they're ready for this. Hear that? They're already alive. They're working. This is called pitching the yeast. I don't know why. I would think it'd be called pouring the yeast because I'm not pitching it. I mean, that would be sloppy and I'd probably miss. So I'm just going to dump the yeast. Now, you don't even have to mix this through. I mean, it's probably not a bad idea, but you don't really actually have to. I'm going to because I want a consistent batch here. And what we're going to do next is take a reading. Now, by reading, I mean a hydrometer reading. Why do we take hydrometer readings? Glad you asked. Multiple reasons. One, so that we know how much sugars are in there. We can find out if I actually got the same amount of starches out as I did last time. And two, it helps us in calculating final gravity. Helps us in calculating alcohol by volume when we take a final gravity. What it also does is, if I know that this is X number and it only drops by a few points over a week, something went wrong. Otherwise, I have no way of knowing where it's at. It's kind of like getting an inside look into the brew. Think of it that way. But I'm just going to take a measurement here. All I do is take my handy dandy turkey baster and put some liquid mort into my handy dandy graduated cylinder. And I know I don't have the hydrometer in the tube already. I can do it that way. I know. I never do. I don't know why. It's just a thing. Don't get too worked up about it. It's okay. I've gotten over it. So can you.
We also are aware that temperature does change things.
Not by a lot. For instance, there's a calibration on our hydrometer. It's probably 68 degrees. They usually are. Does it even say?
I think it says.
I don't know, I can't read it that tiny. But it's probably 68 degrees, okay? And all that means is that at 68 degrees, this is the most accurate. Once you go above 68 degrees, it becomes less accurate. There's charts online you can find out. Basically, it might be a couple of points if we're 30-degree difference. It's really not that big of a deal. If anything, there's a little more alcohol in there than we thought.
Chance for alcohol.
At the end.
Oh, right.
So, last time I made this, the wort came out to 1036. This time it came out to 1042. I like that number better. 42 is just a better number overall than 36. So it's 1.042, which means there's a little bit more chance of higher alcohol content. And okay, what could have caused that? Maybe the grains were a little bit more...
Well, remember.
What?
What does this have in it that the other did not?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. The lactose, quarter pound, lactose works about the same way as white sugar. So it's 46 points per gallon. I did a gallon and a half. So 46 divided by 3, it's about 31. And I did a quarter of that. So yeah, we're talking like 8 points. What do you know? 1042 minus 7 to 8 points. Not that far off of 1036 from the original time that I did this. A variance of a little bit of water can make all the difference in the world. So for all intents and purposes, this came out the same as last time. Don't get worried about a few points of gravity. It's not that critical. This is science and art. I didn't measure a gallon and a half of water. We went, oh, that looks like about halfway up the pitcher. And then we basically heated it for an hour. Some of it's gonna escape. It's okay. See this? This is good wort. See this? This was a very clean, sanitized tube. Guess what I'm gonna do with this? Those of you that say you can't do this or you shouldn't do this, I wanna know why. Someone said on our last video when I asked why, they said it's because people can't pour it as well as I can. Well, that's a big bucket. If you can't get it in there, go ahead, dump it in. What you're getting is a little bit of hops there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's some hop sediment in the bottom of that. It's okay, the hops don't need to stay in there. I did put the hops right in here, so we do still have all of the hop stuff in here. It's okay, it settles to the bottom, it'll get filtered out when we do the racking. But anyway, we have wort. This is becoming beer. Right now that the yeast is in there, technically it's beer. You'd have to drink a lot of it to get drunk at this point. Probably all of it and then some. And you'd probably be sick long before you got drunk because the hops and the yeast, not so good. But what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna take the lid, I'm gonna put it on, and we're gonna get an airlock. You know what an airlock is, right? It's that thing where water goes in, you know, bad stuff goes out, no bad stuff comes back in. They're 2 bucks. We're gonna take an airlock, put it on this. I'm gonna put this under the desk of fermentation, which, for those of you who are wondering how many things are under the desk of fermentation right now, I get asked this all the time. Right now, there are, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 fermentations under the desk of fermentation, but I also have 2 on the counter and now this one. Now that's the desk of fermentation. I also have the closet of fermentation, which has become the closet of aging at this point. It's got several things in there, some of which you're going to see quite soon. But for the most part, it's holding bottles that are like a year plus old. See where I'm going with that? Anyway.
If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and leave
don't
some
forget
comments.
Don't forget to subscribe.
And hit that little bell icon because some people tell us that it works.
Yeah, every once in a while. Also, if you like what you saw here and we didn't babble too much for you and you know it was good content and you found it interesting, we do work off of the support of others. So in order to do that, we have created what we call the VIP Club. And we do that through Patreon and through Subscribestar. So you can join through either method. They're really just a gateway. It's just a way for you to give them the money and then they get it to us. That way everybody's all safe and nobody's getting, you know, weird. But what you get out of that is the VIP Lounge, which is a super secret, well, it's not really secret, but it's a super exclusive group only for our VIP Club members. And in there, I generally, almost every day, do something goofy or make a video or something that I share with our patrons and our VIPs. And it's the easiest, most direct, most efficient way to contact both of us, because we do monitor that group a little bit more closely than the other things that we do. But even if you don't, it's okay. Join us on Facebook. We do have a regular Facebook group, and leave comments below. I tend to get to them within minutes. So as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.
Bye-bye.